The North Peak boardroom felt like a mausoleum at 9:30 p.m. 27 floors above Manhattan, the city's lights bled through floor-to-ceiling windows while I sat across from Veronica Ashford, watching her practice the same smile she'd worn when she stole credit for the Brennan account 6 months ago. "You'll never make it to the top, Logan." Her fingers drummed against the mahogany table. Tap, 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 the same rhythm she played when she was lying or particularly smug. "Not here. Not anywhere that matters." The smile never wavered. Practiced. Perfect. Predatory. I'd seen that expression before, back in Buffalo when my father worked double shifts at the steel plant and my mother cleaned offices until midnight. Different faces, same sentiment. "You don't belong here, boy." Never did, never will. But Veronica Ashford wasn't some foreman's wife sneering at the truck driver's kid. She was North Peak's newest senior vice president, Connecticut pedigree wrapped in a Hermes suit, fresh off a promotion that should have been mine. "Is that your professional assessment?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She laughed, a sound like champagne glasses clinking at a funeral. "Logan, sweetie, you're talented. I'll give you that. But talent isn't enough in this business. You need breeding, vision, the kind of instincts that can't be taught." I nodded, watching her nails continue their percussion. Veronica had a tell, and after 3 years of watching her manipulate clients and colleagues alike, I'd learned to read every micro-expression. "Speaking of instincts," she continued, "I noticed your presentation to the Hartford group could use some refinement. Perhaps next time you could invest in something more client-ready?" Her eyes flicked to my jacket. Off the rack doesn't inspire confidence at our level. My level, not her level. The thing about growing up poor is that you learn to catalog every slight, every dismissal, every casual cruelty. You file them away like evidence, waiting for the moment when the scales tip in your favor. I pulled out my phone, ostensibly to check messages, but really to confirm what I'd suspected for the past hour. The timestamp on my secure files showed 3 recent access attempts from an IP address that traced back to Veronica's workstation. She'd been in my files. "Well," I said, standing and straightening my off-the-rack jacket, "I suppose we'll see who makes it to the top first." Her smile widened. It was meant to be dismissive, final, the kind of expression that ended careers and crushed dreams. But as I walked toward the door, my phone screen cast a pale glow across the conference table. Her smile said I was finished. My screen said she'd just been in my files. The thing about workplace sabotage is that it's never dramatic. No confrontations, no shouting matches, no broken coffee mugs. Just a series of small, professional disappointments that accumulate like carbon monoxide, invisible until you're already unconscious. It started with the Peninsula dinner. I'd spent 2 weeks courting the Meridian Capital account, building rapport with their CFO, positioning North Peak as their exclusive advisory firm. The dinner was meant to be my closing move. Prime rib, aged whiskey, and a handshake that would net the firm $12 million in fees. Instead, I arrived to find my name mysteriously absent from the reservation. The maitre d' apologized profusely, but Meridian Capital had already been seated at another table with the representative they were expecting. Through the restaurant's gilt-framed mirrors, I watched Veronica raise her wine glass in a toast. The next week, my analysis of emerging markets appeared in a client presentation with her initials in the footer. When I brought it to Jennifer Walsh, our department head, Veronica expressed genuine surprise. "Oh, Logan, I'm so sorry. I assumed you were collaborating on this. I added some strategic guidance after you shared it with me, and I must have accidentally saved it under my template." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. "These things happen. Next time, just be more careful about version control." The third incident was subtler. An email chain regarding the Morrison Industries portfolio. A discussion I'd initiated, shepherded, and concluded with a recommendation that saved the client $8 million. But when the chain was forwarded to senior partners, 3 new messages had appeared, time-stamped strategically throughout the conversation. Veronica's insights were woven seamlessly into the narrative, making her look like the strategic mastermind behind my work. I printed the original emails from my sent folder, but by then the official record told a different story. "You look like shit," said Kevin Brennan, sliding a whiskey across the bar at Murphy's. The neon Budweiser sign cast red shadows across his face, making him look like a confessor in hell's waiting room. Just work, I said, but Kevin had been my roommate at Wharton. He could read me better than most. It's the Ice Queen, isn't it? Veronica? I took a long sip of whiskey. You know what she calls me behind my back? The Buffalo Boy. Like I'm some kind of mascot. Kevin shook his head. They only let you play when they've already written the scoreboard, brother. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I stared into the amber depths of my glass, watching the ice cubes slowly dissolve. Outside, Manhattan hummed with the kind of ambition that built empires and destroyed souls in equal measure. She's getting promoted again, I said. Managing director. They're announcing it at the quarterly dinner tomorrow night. And you're going to what? Smile and applaud? I finished my whiskey and set the glass down with deliberate precision. She'll be toasted tomorrow night. I'll be the one lighting the match. The private dining room at Lernard overlooked the Hudson River, where tugboats pushed freight barges through water that reflected the city's lights like scattered diamonds. 43 of North Peak's finest sat around a table that probably cost more than my father made in a year, celebrating the ascension of Veronica Ashford to managing director. She arrived fashionably late in a black dress that whispered money with every step. Valentino, if I had to guess. Maybe $4,000 without the shoes. But it was the jewelry that caught my attention. Cartier necklace, matching earrings, and a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the candlelight like captured fire. I'd done my homework. Veronica's husband, Marcus, was a mid-level accountant at a Queens firm making $68,000 a year. Nice man, stable income, but not the kind of money that bought Cartier by the handful. The necklace alone cost more than his quarterly salary. She worked the room like a seasoned politician, air-kissing colleagues and accepting congratulations with practiced humility. I watched her navigate conversations with surgical precision, asking about Jennifer's daughter's college applications, complimenting David Fletcher on his recent Bloomberg interview, remembering that Thomas Bradley's wife had just undergone surgery. This was Veronica's true talent. Not financial analysis or strategic thinking, but the ability to make powerful people feel seen, appreciated, valued. It was a skill I'd never mastered and probably never would. Logan, I'm so glad you could make it. She materialized beside me with that practiced smile, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. The gesture was intimate enough to suggest collegiality, brief enough to maintain professional distance. I hope there are no hard feelings about the promotion. None at all, I said, raising my wine glass in what she'd interpret as gracious defeat. You're exactly what they were looking for. Her laugh was music, the kind that played while empires crumbled. You're too kind. I know this has been challenging for you. But talent always finds its place, doesn't it? The condescension was expertly wrapped in encouragement, like poison in honey. Around us, conversations flowed in their usual patterns, Jennifer discussing the Connecticut municipal bond offering with her trademark intensity. David Fletcher holding court about semiconductor futures while younger associates hung on every word. The background symphony of money talking to money, power recognizing power. I cataloged the details that would matter later. James Whitmore's nervous habit of checking his phone every few minutes. Unusual for a man who typically commanded rooms with absolute presence. Thomas Bradley's wife wearing jewelry that seemed oddly expensive for a partner's spouse. The way certain conversations quieted when I approached, then resumed when I moved away. North Peak had always been a firm built on relationships rather than pure performance. The best analysts didn't always get promoted. The most connected ones did. Tonight's celebration was proof of that principle in action. Actually, Veronica continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, I wanted to thank you for your work on the Hartford analysis. Your research provided the foundation for my presentation to the board. Foundation, not collaboration, not partnership. Foundation, as in, the thing you build on top of. I'm glad it was useful, I said. More than useful. Essential. She touched my arm again, a gesture that would look supportive to casual observers while delivering a message only I could decode. You did the work. I got the credit. Thank you for understanding your place. I excused myself after the second course, navigating through conversations about vacation homes in the Hamptons and children attending Ivy League schools. The restaurant's marble-appointed restroom provided temporary sanctuary from the performance, but more importantly, it offered privacy for the call I'd been planning for 3 days. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the distracted tone of someone reviewing spreadsheets after hours. Marcus? It's Logan Reeves from North Peak. Logan. Veronica's mentioned you. The analyst, right? How can I help you? I took a breath, knowing this conversation would change both our lives. Marcus, I know this might sound strange, but I think we need to talk, in person. It's about Veronica. Silence stretched across the line. When he spoke again, his voice had sharpened with the kind of attention that comes when someone mentions your spouse in a tone that suggests trouble. What about Veronica? Tuesday afternoons at the Plaza Hotel. Cartier receipts that don't match her salary. Client meetings that don't exist on any calendar. I paused, letting the implications settle. Marcus, I think your wife is having an affair, and I think she's funding it with stolen money. The silence this time was different. Heavier, more dangerous. That's impossible. Veronica wouldn't. She's not. The jewelry she's wearing tonight costs more than you make in 6 months. The dress probably cost what most people spend on rent. Where do you think that money comes from? I heard him breathing, processing, probably staring at some innocuous object while his world shifted beneath him. I need proof, he said finally. Meet me tomorrow. I'll show you everything. When I returned to the table, the managing partners were preparing their speeches. James Whitmore stood with his wineglass raised, his usual commanding presence slightly diminished by whatever was making him check his phone compulsively. Tonight, we celebrate not just a promotion, but a testament to what vision and dedication can accomplish in our industry. Veronica Ashford represents the best of what North Peak stands for: innovation, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to our clients' success. The irony was suffocating. I watched Veronica's face glow with triumph while Whitmore praised her integrity to a room full of people who had no idea they were witnessing the celebration of a criminal enterprise. In an industry built on trust, Whitmore continued, Veronica has consistently demonstrated the judgment and character that our clients deserve. Her promotion to managing director reflects not just her past achievements, but our confidence in her future leadership. Trust, character, judgment. The words rang hollow when you knew the truth about Tuesday afternoons and Cartier purchases funded by elderly clients' retirement savings. So let's raise our glasses to Veronica Ashford. May she continue to exemplify the excellence that defines North Peak Securities. The room erupted in applause. I stood with the rest, my wine glass catching the chandelier's light like a crystal dagger. To Veronica, I said, my voice cutting through the applause with perfect clarity. May you get everything you deserve. She beamed at me, reading it as gracious congratulation from a defeated rival. The table around us nodded approvingly. How sporting of Logan to accept his loss with such dignity. I finished my wine, set down my napkin with deliberate precision, and placed a sealed envelope beside her plate. The envelope contained my resignation letter, effective immediately, along with a detailed inventory of every suspicious transaction I documented over the past 18 months. "What's this?" she asked, still basking in the afterglow of toasts and applause. "Just some paperwork," I said, standing to leave. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." I was halfway across the dining room when I heard her phone buzzing against the mahogany table. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced back to see her fumbling for it while trying to maintain conversation with Jennifer Walsh about quarterly projections. The screen lit up her face like an interrogation lamp. Marcus H., 6 missed calls. Her practiced smile cracked for just a moment. A hairline fracture in the facade she'd spent years perfecting. She looked down at the envelope beside her plate, then back at her phone as it buzzed again with incoming texts. The last thing I saw before the elevator doors closed was Veronica Ashford, managing director of North Peak Securities, staring at her phone while 42 of Manhattan's financial elite celebrated around her, completely unaware that they were, witnessing the beginning of the end. My apartment in Brooklyn Heights had never felt smaller. Rain drummed against the windows while I sat surrounded by 7 years' worth of evidence, organized in neat stacks across every available surface like a paper monument to methodical revenge. The coffee table held client files arranged chronologically. The dining table displayed bank records and credit reports. The kitchen counter was covered with printed emails, phone logs, and expense reports. My laptop sat in the center of it all, displaying a spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious transaction I'd uncovered over 18 months of careful investigation. I'd been building this case since the day I first noticed the pattern in Veronica's client recommendations. It started with Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a 78-year-old widow who'd entrusted North Peak with her late husband's pension fund. Within 6 months of becoming Veronica's client, Mrs. Patterson's conservative portfolio had been restructured around high-fee Connecticut municipal bonds managed by a Delaware shell company called Meridian Advisory Services. The fees were astronomical, 2.8% annually, plus transaction costs that ate away at principal like acid. For a client who'd specifically requested low-risk, low-cost investments to preserve capital for her grandchildren's education. But Mrs. Patterson was just the beginning. I'd found 16 more cases following the identical pattern. Elderly clients with limited financial sophistication, guided toward products that generated massive fees, managed by Delaware shells that funneled consulting payments back to, well, that had been the missing piece until tonight. My whiteboard looked like a detective's murder wall. Red yarn connected North Peak clients to Meridian Advisory Services. Blue yarn tracked consulting payments from Meridian to Ashford Financial Consulting, a company that existed only on paper and had never provided any documented services. Green yarn followed the money from Ashford Financial to Veronica's personal accounts at 3 different banks. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. Conservative estimate: $4.2 million in fraudulent consulting fees over 3 years. But the real crime wasn't just theft. It was the systematic betrayal of fiduciary duty to clients who trusted North Peak with their life savings. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m., jarring me from calculations that were making my stomach turn. Logan. Marcus Ashford's voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I went through everything: credit card statements, bank records, emails. Jesus Christ, Logan, what has she done? I minimized the spreadsheet and leaned back in my chair, watching rain streak down windows that reflected the chaos of documents spread across my apartment. How much did you know, Marcus? Nothing. I swear to God, nothing. His voice cracked with the weight of betrayal compounding betrayal. I thought the jewelry was performance bonuses, the clothes, the spa weekends. She said it was all networking, client development, building relationships that brought in business. He paused, and I could hear him breathing through what sounded like tears or rage or both. The Plaza Hotel charges, Logan. They're every Tuesday for the past 8 months. Same room, same time, charged to her corporate card as client meetings. But when I checked her calendar, there are no meetings scheduled. Ever. Who do you think she's meeting? James Whitmore. The name came out like poison. I found text messages, not explicit, but intimate. Planning meetings, talking about being careful, references to jewelry he was buying her. That Cartier necklace she wore tonight? It wasn't from her bonus. It was from him. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. James Whitmore wasn't just North Peak's founding partner. He was also the primary decision-maker for the Delaware shell companies that managed client assets. His affair with Veronica wasn't just adultery. It was the key to understanding how the money flowed from client accounts to her personal bank account. Marcus, I need you to understand something, I said carefully. This isn't just about adultery or even theft. Veronica and Whitmore have been systematically defrauding elderly clients. People like Mrs. Patterson, who trusted them with her deceased husband's pension. They've stolen millions. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the cold precision of someone who'd moved past shock into calculation. What do you need from me? Everything. Bank statements, credit card records, emails, text messages. Anything that shows unexplained income, luxury purchases, or communication with Whitmore. And Marcus? File for divorce. Tomorrow morning. The court discovery process will subpoena everything, and once it's part of legal proceedings, it becomes part of the federal record. Will that be enough? I looked at my whiteboard, with its red and blue and green lines connecting the dots between crime and consequence. It'll be a start. After Marcus hung up, I spent another 3 hours cross-referencing transaction dates with hotel receipts, jewelry purchases with client meeting schedules, consulting payments with performance reviews. Every connection strengthened the case. Every detail painted a clearer picture of systematic fraud orchestrated at the highest levels of North Peak Securities. At 1:23 a.m., I uploaded a 47-page dossier to the SEC's secure whistleblower portal. The file included client statements, bank records, email correspondence, expense reports, and a detailed analysis showing how Meridian Advisory Services existed solely to funnel kickbacks from elderly clients' accounts to Veronica's personal assets. The upload progress bar crawled across my screen. 47%, 68%, 89%, 100%. Submit 7 years of careful documentation. 18 months of methodical investigation. 1 night of decisive action. No more whispers in boardrooms. No more performance reviews where talent lost to connections. No more watching elderly clients get systematically robbed by people they trusted. Now it's subpoenas. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after sleepless nights and burned bridges. I was nursing my second cup of coffee, watching CNN's pre-market coverage, when my phone exploded with Jessica's text. Emergency. Her husband is in HR with the partners right now. Boxes everywhere. Security called. I grabbed the first train into Manhattan, my mind racing through implications. Marcus had moved faster than I'd expected. The divorce filing must have triggered discovery procedures that forced his hand. Either cooperate with federal investigators or risk becoming a co-conspirator. North Peak's lobby buzzed with unusual activity for 9:30 a.m. Associates huddled in whispered conversations. Senior staff moved with purposeful urgency, and I could see through the glass walls of the 27th floor that half the conference rooms were occupied by people who definitely weren't North Peak. Employees. The elevator opened with surgical precision, disgorging the morning's casualties. Veronica stepped out first, and I barely recognized her. The woman who'd commanded boardrooms and intimidated junior analysts now looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her signature red lipstick was gone. Her usually perfect hair showed signs of hasty styling, and her eyes carried the hollow look of someone who'd just discovered that consequences were real. Marcus followed, flanked by Jennifer Walsh and David Fletcher. But it was the third man who caught my attention. Tall, gray-suited, carrying himself with the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. FBI, most likely, or SEC Enforcement Division. Marcus carried a manila folder so thick it required both hands, the kind of documentation that represented years of marriage unwound into evidence. I positioned myself near the reception desk, pretending to review emails while eavesdropping on fragments of conversation that would probably become testimony within weeks. $12,000 bracelet charged to client development on the same day she claimed to be visiting the Hartford prospect. Pattern of luxury purchases following major client asset transfers. Hotel charges that don't correspond to any documented meetings, but occur every Tuesday for 8 consecutive months. Jennifer Walsh looked like she was physically ill. As head of compliance, she'd signed off on expense reports that were now evidence of federal crimes. David Fletcher kept checking his phone, probably calculating how this would affect his own position once the SEC started examining every transaction North Peak had processed over the past 3 years. The gray-suited federal agent said something quietly to Jennifer, and she nodded with the grim acceptance of someone who'd just been informed that her career was about to become collateral damage. Veronica stopped suddenly, 20 feet from the exit, turning to face Marcus with an expression that cycled through disbelief, fury, and something that might have been genuine fear. The lobby's usual hum of professional activity quieted as people sensed drama about to unfold. "This is a setup," she said, her voice carrying the kind of controlled desperation that comes when someone realizes they're drowning and the lifeboats have already left. You're destroying my career because you can't handle having a successful wife." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Around us, North Peak employees tried to pretend they weren't witnessing their former managing director's public meltdown while simultaneously recording every detail for later gossip. Marcus's response was quiet, but carried across the marble-floored space with perfect clarity. "I'm protecting innocent people from a criminal." The word criminal hit like a physical blow. Veronica actually staggered, her professional composure finally cracking completely. "Criminal?" Her voice rose to a pitch that made security guards shift nervously. "I generated $40 million in revenue for this firm last year. I brought in clients that wouldn't have looked at North Peak without my relationships. I built half the portfolios that fund your paychecks." "With stolen money," Marcus replied, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent sleepless nights studying bank statements and credit card receipts. "Mrs. Patterson's pension fund, the Morrison Family Trust, elderly clients who trusted you with their life savings while you funneled their assets into kickback schemes." The lobby fell completely silent. Even the security guards stopped their casual conversation to stare at this implosion of a marriage and career happening in real time. Jennifer Walsh stepped between them with the crisis management instincts of someone who'd spent 30 years in financial services. "This discussion ends now. Veronica, you're suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you out immediately." I watched from across the lobby as two guards approached. Not aggressive, but unmistakably present. These weren't the usual rent-a-cops who checked badges and signed in visitors. These were serious men who'd probably been briefed about federal investigations and the possibility of flight risk. Veronica's corporate badge had been the symbol of her 7-year climb up North Peak's hierarchy. She'd worn it like a medal, swiping through turnstiles with the confidence of someone who belonged in spaces where money made more money. Now it was just a plastic rectangle that meant nothing. She walked toward the exit with forced dignity, every step watched by colleagues who'd applauded her promotion just days earlier. Associates she'd mentored, partners she'd impressed, administrative staff she'd barely acknowledged, all of them witnessing her public destruction. When she reached the security turnstiles, muscle memory took over. She swiped her badge with the same practiced confidence she'd displayed thousands of times before. Nothing happened. The turnstile remained locked, its red light blinking with mechanical indifference. She stared at the device for a moment, as if willing it to recognize her authority, then tried again with more force. Still nothing. The security guard approached with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, I'll need to take your badge." "This is temporary," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is all a misunderstanding that will be cleared up by tomorrow." The guard extended his hand with patient politeness. "Your badge, please." Veronica jerked away from his reach, clutching the badge like a talisman against career death. "I built this place," she screamed, her voice echoing off marble walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. "You people would be nothing without me. Nothing." The lobby erupted in whispers and smartphone cameras. Tomorrow, this moment would be gifed, memed, and shared across financial Twitter as cautionary tale about hubris and federal investigations. 7 years, she continued, her professional mask completely shattered. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, of bringing in clients and generating revenue and making this firm relevant. And you're going to destroy that because of accounting irregularities? Accounting irregularities. Even in her breakdown, she couldn't acknowledge the reality of what she'd done. The elevator doors opened behind her, revealing James Whitmore flanked by 2 more federal agents. His face was gray, his usual commanding presence reduced to the shuffle of someone who knew that handcuffs were probably in his immediate future. Veronica saw him, and something in her expression shifted from rage to desperate calculation. "James," she called out, her voice carrying across the lobby, Tell them about the consulting agreements, about how the Delaware structures were your idea, about how—" "Shut up, Veronica." Whitmore's voice cut through her plea with icy finality. "Just shut up and get a lawyer." The elevator doors closed on his face, leaving Veronica standing alone in a lobby full of people who were already pretending they didn't know her. Her badge fails at the turnstile. She screams, "I built this place!" Agent Peterson from the SEC called at 2:17 p.m. while I sat in Central Park, watching joggers navigate paths that probably cost more per square foot than most people's apartments. Mr. Reeves, we've obtained an emergency freeze order on Ms. Ashford's accounts. Personal and business. Everything's locked down as of an hour ago. I closed my eyes, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been exhaustion. What happens next? Interviews. Lots of them. We'll need you to walk us through the documentation you provided, verify timelines, confirm your analysis of the money flows. Are you available Thursday morning? I'll be there. And Mr. Reeves? This was good work. Really good work. People like Ashford count on everyone looking the other way. After he hung up, I called Jessica. "Holy shit, Logan," she whispered. "The whole floor is going crazy. Partners are locked in emergency meetings, and apparently James Whitmore's wife threw him out last night. Someone leaked that he's being investigated too." "What about Veronica?" "Gone. Badge deactivated, office locked, personal items boxed up. It's like she never existed. Except everyone's talking about her screaming in the lobby." I leaned back against a park bench, watching clouds drift across a sky that seemed impossibly blue for October. Somewhere in Manhattan, 43 floors above the chaos, North Peak's partners were probably crafting press releases about integrity and full cooperation with authorities. My phone buzzed with a breaking news alert from Bloomberg. Sources: SEC probing prominent Manhattan investment firm over client fraud allegations. No names yet, but that would change soon. The Wall Street Journal arrived at my Brooklyn newsstand like a loaded gun wrapped in newspaper. I bought a copy at 6:47 a.m., scanning the front page while the vendor made change. Prominent Manhattan investment firm under federal scrutiny. The article didn't name Veronica specifically, but the details were unmistakable. Sources familiar with the investigation describe a sophisticated scheme involving high-fee investment products and undisclosed kickback arrangements. The reporter had done their homework, or someone had fed them information that painted a clear picture without crossing legal lines. North Peak stock opened down 12%. By noon, it had fallen 18% as investors processed the implications of a federal securities investigation. I spent the morning in a coffee shop in Park Slope, watching CNBC coverage while traders and analysts tried to parse what this meant for the firm's future. The ticker at the bottom of the screen showed North Peak Securities in red numbers that bled across the financial district like a hemorrhage. My phone rang at 1:15 p.m. Jennifer Walsh. "Logan, we need to talk. Are you available this afternoon?" "Depends on what we're talking about." "Your future at North Peak. Despite recent developments, the partners believe you have significant potential within the organization." I almost laughed. 3 days ago, I was the Buffalo boy who'd never make it to the top. Today, with Veronica's career in ruins and federal investigators circling, suddenly I had significant potential. "I appreciate that, Jennifer, but I think my future lies elsewhere." Silence stretched across the phone line. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone trying to manage a crisis with diminishing options. "Logan, I hope you understand that loose talk about internal matters could be professionally damaging." "I understand completely," I said, "but I think you'll find that ship has already sailed." I hung up and bought another copy of the journal, this time turning to the business section. A smaller article on page B4 caught my attention. North Peak executive removed amid federal investigation. Still no name. But the walls were closing in. Tomorrow, the charges would print names. Hers at the top. Thursday morning arrived like a judgment day that had been postponed too long. I was drinking coffee in my apartment when CNN broke the news. Federal prosecutors have filed securities fraud charges against Veronica Ashford, a former managing director at North Peak Securities. 8 counts of securities fraud, 2 counts of investment advisor fraud, 1 count of money laundering. The camera cut to courthouse steps where Veronica emerged from a black sedan, hands cuffed behind her back, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her makeup absent. The woman who'd built her career on polished presentations and commanding boardrooms now looked smaller, diminished, almost fragile under the harsh glare of media attention. Reporters shouted questions. "Miss Ashford, how do you respond to the charges? Did you know your clients were being defrauded? What about the kickback allegations? She kept her eyes fixed on the concrete steps, refusing to engage with the circus surrounding her downfall. For a moment, I felt something that might have been sympathy, until I remembered Mrs. Patterson, the 78-year-old widow whose retirement savings Veronica had systematically looted through fraudulent investment schemes. I watched the coverage from a cafe in Brooklyn Heights, sipping black coffee while financial news anchors dissected her career and speculated about North Peak's future. The firm's stock had stabilized somewhat, but the damage was clear. 18% down and trading on uncertainty about how deep the fraud extended. My phone buzzed with text messages from former colleagues. Some offered support, others seemed to be fishing for information about my role in the investigation. I ignored most of them. She looked at the ground. I looked at the sky breaking blue. The aftermath unfolded with the inexorable logic of gravity. FINRA banned Veronica from the securities industry for life. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight. Her professional associations quietly scrubbed her name from member directories, and the Connecticut Society pages that had once featured her charitable activities went silent. The gossip blogs were less discreet. Plaza Hotel Tuesdays and Cartier Gifts. Inside the affairs that brought down a Wall Street power player. The articles painted a picture of calculated adultery funded by stolen retirement savings, complete with receipts and photographic evidence that Marcus had presumably provided during discovery. James Whitmore's situation proved equally devastating. His involvement in the Delaware shell companies made him a co-conspirator rather than a victim, and North Peak's board voted him out within a week of the indictments. The Hamptons house went up for sale immediately, followed by the Manhattan penthouse and the collection of vintage automobiles he'd accumulated over 30 years in finance. I packed my apartment on a Sunday morning in November, boxing up 7 years of New York ambition into containers that would fit in a rental truck. The job offer from Brighton Renewable Capital in Portland had come through corporate headhunters who specialized in discrete transitions, the kind of career moves that happened when staying in your current city became professionally complicated. The offer was generous. 20% salary increase, equity participation, and the chance to build clean energy portfolios for clients who actually wanted to make the world better. More importantly, it was 3,000 miles from the wreckage of North Peak Securities and the federal courthouse where Veronica Ashford would eventually stand trial. Marcus and I met for lunch at a quiet restaurant in Queens the day before I left. He looked older, worn down by months of depositions and media attention, but there was something peaceful in his expression. "She called me last week," he said, cutting into his sandwich with deliberate precision. "From her lawyer's office. Wanted to tell me that this was all your fault, that you set her up, destroyed our marriage, ruined her career." I waited, unsure what response he expected. "And what did you tell her?" Marcus smiled for the first time in our brief friendship. "I told her that successful people don't end up in federal prison." We shook hands outside the restaurant, two men who'd discovered different kinds of betrayal and chosen different paths forward. He was staying in Queens, rebuilding his life one day at a time. I was driving west toward mountains and possibilities that didn't require corporate badges or approval from people who'd never really accepted me anyway. The Portland newsstand was 20 blocks from my new apartment, wedged between a coffee roaster and a bookstore that specialized in environmental policy. I bought a Wall Street Journal out of habit, scanning headlines about interest rates and emerging markets while rain drummed against the store's windows. Page B6 carried a small item about sentencing in federal court. Ex-North Peak executive receives prison term in fraud case. Veronica Ashford, 42 months in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, restitution of $4.2 million to defrauded clients. I folded the paper and walked toward my reflection in the newsstand's rain-streaked window. The face looking back at me wasn't triumphant or satisfied, just tired, maybe a little older, definitely wiser about the difference between climbing someone else's ladder and building your own. Not on top of their ladder, but finally on his own.